Good afternoon. Welcome to Chicago Humanities and our full day of programs here on Northwestern University's campus. I'm Philip Bahar. I'm the Executive Director of Chicago Humanities, and for 35 years we've been bringing compelling conversations, powerful performances, and events all across Chicago to connect people to ideas and to each other. And this is our 14th year actually on Northwestern's campus, working with their professors in a variety of departments, from the Block Museum to the Kaplan Institute for the Humanities. And especially this year, we thank the Buffett Institute for Global Affairs, who has partnered with us on our events today. They're supporting also a number of other programs if you want to continue your day with us after our conversation with John Green, with author Kaveh Akbar, who just released his book Martyr, Wendy Perlman on the new Syrian diaspora, and a consideration of contemporary political and late-night comedy with Second City's Kelly Leonard and 4 different writers for a number of different late-night shows. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to give special thanks to our presenting partners, Good Chaos, Friedman Properties, and the Robert R. McCormick Foundation, our season sponsors, Wintrust and Southwest Airlines, and Anita and Prabha Sinha. If you love what we do, please do consider becoming a member. Our members and donors support over 70% of our budget, so please do support us and come back and see a lot of other great speakers along the year. Now a few words about our speakers. John Green is the New York Times bestselling author. You all know what he's written. Looking for Alaska, The Fault in Our Stars, Turtles All the Way Down, in the Anthropocene Reviewed, a few of them at least. He's sold over 24 million books and in print in 55 languages, and he just signed over 100,000 books of his upcoming book just announced, which is Everything is Tuberculosis, a history of one of our deadliest diseases. He's half of the Vlog Brothers on YouTube and co-creator of the educational series Crash Course, and he is joined today by Chicago's own Rebecca Makkai, the author of the New York Times bestselling I Have Some Questions for You that just came out this year, as well as the novels 100-Year House and the short story collection Music for Wartime. Her book, The Great Believers, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. She's a Guggenheim Fellow and teaches fiction, graduate fiction here at Northwestern University, UNR Tahoe, and Middlebury College. And she's also the artistic director of Storio Studio Chicago, a really great local institution. So please help me in welcoming Rebecca Makkai and John Green.
Hey, all. Thanks for being here with us.
Just realized that was like the theater kid in me that felt like I couldn't walk in front of you. I had to go behind
Right,
you rather
yeah,
than doing the
that's
logical thing. Oh.
Very appropriate.
Welcome.
Thanks. I love being here in Chicago. This is my wife's alma mater, so I got to walk around campus with her, and she showed me all of her past, which was lovely.
Hey. We're talking to each other, but because you got an interview to do later, so I'm kind of like starting us off asking questions.
Great.
Right. So the question I'm going to ask you to start off is, I wonder if you can explain, I think anyone who's read all of your work has kind of picked up on your bio, but can you explain your Chicago background and your relationship with this place?
Yeah, so I lived in Chicago between when I graduated from college. I worked as a chaplain at a children's hospital in Columbus, Ohio, and then I was going to go to the University of Chicago Divinity School, but I kind of bombed out pretty immediately and ended up working at a magazine here in Chicago called Booklist, and spent 6 years working at that magazine, living in Chicago, and writing my first 2 novels. So both of my first 2 novels were written in Lincoln Square, and you know, this is the city where I met Sarah, and where, you know, so much of my life took form. You know, when we were driving up here today with our now 14-year-old kid, I was thinking it was both a lifetime ago and just happened.
Yeah, it's I love, it's like the times that you write about Chicago, which is not all the time, but when you do put Chicago on the page in fiction, like Will Grayson, right? It's very clear that you know Chicago. Where sometimes you get people who are writing about Chicago, and it's clear that they've visited Chicago.
Right.
But like, I'm going to be terrible. I'm not going to say any names, but a book recently where people were in Chicago and they needed to meet each other for, like Chicagoans needed to meet each other for an important conversation, so they decided to meet at the Bean, as one does.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's funny.
Right? That is a thing in Chicago. You got that right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, people do go there. It's just funny to
Sure.
think that you'd like meet there for like your critical conversation.
Absolutely. The people who already live in Chicago
Right.
are like, we're going to go there.
Yeah. Let's go like south on Lakeshore Drive. That sounds fun. I love the way you write about place. You're one of my favorite place writers.
Oh, thanks.
And the way that, especially, and I have some questions for you, the way that you, Sarah and I were talking about it, it almost feels like you can smell the air in that school. And it's so evocative. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you think of place.
Yeah, and then I want to hear how you do too. I'll say I have this like pet peeve when people say, "Oh, the setting was so great it was almost a character," right? Like the setting of the hospital was almost a character. The setting of the town was almost a character. It doesn't make any sense to me. A setting is its own thing. And it needs to be thought about in a very different way. The characters are there to change. Setting is not necessarily there to change. Setting is there to put pressure on the situation, which is not what characters do necessarily. Setting is something you have to kind of like infuse through. I think a mistake I definitely made early on was just kind of establishing the setting and forgetting about it, rather than having it be just present as something people touch and walk through and smell and delight. And it's a whole skill set.
Yeah.
That, I think if we say to each other as writers too often, or as readers say to writers, like, oh, it was almost a character, you feel like it's just another of those things I already know how to do. I know how to write characters, so I got it. I got the setting, and it's a whole other thing.
Well, I like the idea that it's there partly to put pressure on you.
Yeah.
And I have some questions for you, especially. It's there partly. It's almost there in two places, like because it's there in two times.
Right. Yeah.
And those two times feel so distinct that the places almost feel distinct too, even though it's the same geographic location. And I think about that a lot when writing. I mean, I mostly set my novels now in Indianapolis, where I live and where I've lived for the last 15 years, partly because there just aren't that many novels set in Indianapolis, and so I have a structural advantage when it comes to those, like maps of every state. Like, what's the most famous book from that state?
Right,
like,
right.
It's either me or Annie.
Yeah. You gotta aim. You gotta like aim for the statue of you to be put up in the park someday, like the Indianapolis author.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
James Whitcomb Riley, my greatest nemesis, is buried at the very top of Crown Hill at Crown Hill Cemetery, home to more dead vice presidents than any other location on Earth, incidentally. Now, if you ever go to Indianapolis, you got to go to Crown Hill. It's an incredible collection of dead vice presidents, literally unparalleled in the country. And on top of the hill that the cemetery is named for, there is James Whitcomb Riley. And there's literally no way to be buried on top of him. So he's already got me.
Yeah. But does he have a statue?
He doesn't have a statue. That's a great point, Rebecca.
Yeah. Yes.
A kid can dream. When I'm writing about Indianapolis, I try to write about it as a place where real lives happen.
Yeah.
I think, to your point earlier, when you're writing about a place you don't know as well, a lot of times you exoticize it, or you think of it as the Bean, right? Like nobody who lives in Chicago wakes up and thinks like, oh, I live in the city of the Bean.
Let's go there today. Right.
Well, just as like if you live in Venice, you don't think of yourself as, living among piazzas, like you're just living.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how setting works best, if it's seen as the milieu in which the people find themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the physical space, it's also the other parts of the milieu.
Yeah, class.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah, all the ways in which they find themselves situated in the world, and there are constraints put upon them by the spaces where they inhabit.
Yeah, I also feel, and I imagine you have done the same, but I think that when I've decided on a setting and it's a real place in the world, being able to go there and walk around, which was not the case with I Have Some Questions for You, but The Great Believers, which was set in Boys Town, just walking and walking and walking and walking, and kind of letting the setting inspire things, bring things about, right? And I would imagine you've done that with Amsterdam and...
For sure, for sure. We lived in Amsterdam. And part of the reason I set Part of the Fault in Our Stars in Amsterdam is because we were living there for a few months, and I was fascinated by the experience of it as a tourist versus as somebody just living there even for a short period. And also it's the opposite of Indianapolis. Like they're both cities, they're both cities of canals. But other than that, they don't have a ton in common.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, our canals, frankly, are not quite as beautiful. So yeah. So for all those reasons, it seemed like a nice place to send those characters that was distinctly different from what they were used to.
Yeah, but it's you know that place, and I'm sure, I don't know if you were writing it while you were there or if you were writing it later.
Both, partly while I was there and partly later.
Yeah.
But definitely being there helped, and then having the memory of it helps. I'm just not that creative of an imaginer of space, and
Yeah.
so I really do need to be in the spaces where I'm writing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm both, where I, really take inspiration from walking around the place, but oh my God, with my last book, did I have fun inventing a boarding school campus and drawing little maps and little
Oh, that's great.
It was so, I felt like I was writing The Lord of the Rings. Like I had so much fun. Oh my God.
My boarding school novel was so much set at my actual boarding school
Yeah.
that you could map it and the maps would look identical.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought you did an amazing job of imagining a boarding school. But you do live near a boarding school.
I live at a boarding school.
So it wasn't. And this is something I've wondered about your work, because people are, especially now, people really like to read an author into their work,
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
there's a much more complicated relationship between biography and
Yeah.
fiction than there used to be.
Yep.
Because we're all making ourselves public figures and like saying like, oh, don't think about the author, but also do read my tweets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder how you've navigated that, or how you found that, especially
Yeah.
with this book.
I'm curious too. So this is why I invented a campus, because the reason I live up in Lake Forest, my husband teaches at Lake Forest Academy, which is a really cool boarding school, and we live on the campus. And I would have died if anyone thought I was writing about that school. And because bad things happen, and there's a predatory teacher in this novel, and I got it just bend over backwards to make it not that school. So I put it in New Hampshire, and I made it a big ski school, and ski schools here. That was really, really important to me. And at the same time, I think the connection that I totally know this world. I also attended this school long before my husband taught there. So this is a world I know really well. That's important for me that people know that, and it's like a hook in. But then, hey, now that you're here, please know I invented this.
Yeah.
It's tricky. But you do, I'm thinking, just reading the Anthropocene Revealed, I'm seeing things about your own life that we can easily trace into, oh, that's why he put that in this book. That's why he put that in this book. There is that connection. So you're kind of inviting that in a way.
I am inviting it because I don't know what else to do with it. I don't know how else to handle it other than to just acknowledge that it exists.
Yeah.
That, yes, I worked at a children's hospital and I knew a lot of sick kids. And yes, I went to a boarding school, and while I was there, one of my friends died. And yes, but I don't know how to handle that, because I would like that to be read as fiction.
Yeah.
I would like it to be viewed the way that we view stories, but how can I also ask that when I'm saying, but also watch my videos, read my tweets, be here with me, the real me. And so finally I felt like with the Anthropocene Reviewed book that I had to just be myself.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I couldn't write, it really felt like I couldn't write fiction at that point, because especially after I wrote Turtles All the Way Down, because the main character there has OCD and I also have OCD, and I would be on these interview shows where the interviewer would be quite brazenly confusing me and the novel.
Yeah.
And I would be like, no, I don't. Like, I remember Terry Gross, who seems like a nice person, asked me, do you also, like the main character of this book, experience panic attacks while kissing? And I was like, yikes. I feel bad for you that you asked that question. Like, that's a real yikeser for me.
Oh my God.
No, as it happens, but like also none of your business. But also here I am on this interview show talking about myself. So how can I ask them to? How can I tell them where the line is? I don't know where the line is.
Yeah. It's tough too. I think my first novel, it's a book called The Borrower, and it's about a librarian who accidentally kidnaps a 10-year-old child. It is not autobiographical. It was first person, and it was like a young woman as the narrator. And that, I got so often people saying, well, when you do this in the book, like, I did no such thing. And
I
people,
did not like it when you did that.
But what bothered me more was people who assume in reviews of various kinds that I must not know that this character did something wrong. I must only know as much as my character.
I know. That drives me crazy too.
Yeah.
That somehow the job of a character is to be so thoroughly and totally likable.
Yes.
That if they have any lack of self-awareness, that's a failure of the fiction. But of course, like, if you've ever met a human being, like, they all lack self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's like the defining feature of them.
Yeah, and it's like, I think for us, it's like, listen, I spent 5 years probably, at least, living with this character, thinking about this character more than I think about myself, right? And outlining every facet of them. It didn't slip by me. That this person made a mistake, right? It was not accidental. But it's...
Yeah, but I that's the only way to handle it is with, like, jokes.
Yeah,
because it's so absurd. It's very difficult to navigate that.
Yeah, I am writing, the book that I'm writing, finishing right now, is about someone genuinely bad. So it's a novel, but it's about a historical figure who really did bad things. And it's a woman, and so people tend to judge that much more harshly as well, which is interesting. Female characters, but my hope is that maybe this time people will understand that I know she did bad things, given that she is like a loathsome human, where I'm not going to get people going, it wasn't always easy to like her. I gotta tell you, sometimes.
I got a great comment on my first novel once where somebody said, I really liked the first half of your book. But I thought in the second half, it really undermined the first half. And I was like, that was the idea. That is indeed why books have second halves.
Oh my God. Yep. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's funny because these like, you can have 100 people all be like, I loved your book, and it's the one person who says the funny thing that
it is such a fun. That is a weird thing, right? Like, we're all like that. Like, we all remember something that somebody said to us in seventh grade, like some negative thing.
Absolutely.
And I only have one memory of seventh grade. And it's the one negative thing I'm sure lots of people said lots of negative things, but like one thing that really stuck in my craw.
Oh yeah.
And it's so, I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's such a weird phenomenon that criticism penetrates us in a way that praise doesn't. Just in general, I see it with my kids too, that criticism penetrates them in a way that praise doesn't. And I don't know exactly what it is, except that maybe we think the criticism is somehow secretly real or somehow legitimate and reveals us to be who we know ourselves to be, which is an imposter and a horrible person.
I bet it's evolutionary.
You think so?
I do. I think that, like, it's that thing of, like, you get an upset stomach from a food once. You're going to remember that, and that smell is going to nauseate you for the rest of your life, because for most of human history, you needed to learn really fast, don't eat those berries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you make a mistake and it goes into long-term memory, like whatever part of the brain that is. It goes in there because you don't want yourself to make that same mistake again, even if it wasn't a mistake and even if you,
Right.
But I think it's like it goes in because that's, our memory flags it as this must be important for my survival.
Yeah, I've written about this before, but mortifications especially stick with me.
Yeah.
So like when I go to bed at night, it's just like a sizzle reel of my mortifications. It's just like, do you remember that one time? And do you remember that time?
Yeah.
And you remember that time you were giving a speech and your fly was down the entire time? And the kid asked a question, do you realize your fly is down? And everyone laughed. And, do you remember that one? Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is...
This is like a therapy session.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. The good thing is, at least we know we're doing this. Like, there's at least some distance to say, yeah, I understand that that's only a small percentage.
Right.
Right, which is something I think you grow into. Because when you're younger, you feel like everybody hates me. And then you get older and you're like, okay, 1 person out of 1,000 hates me. And yes, I memorized what they said and I'll never forget it, but it's 1 person out of 1,000.
I'm glad that you've gotten there.
Yeah.
I look forward to reaching this level of enlightenment.
Sort of. Yeah. Okay, so I think I realized that I said the name of your book wrong before, unless I just am like replaying it in my head and said it wrong only in my head. I think I said revealed instead of reviewed.
Okay.
But, so, two questions.
I'm not mad.
That's okay.
Don't let that go into long-term memory.
Okay, no, we're good. One of the reasons we're good is for every one of my books, there is a specific wrong way that people say it again and again.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm assuming the same is true for you.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's an alternate title out there.
A Fault in the Stars.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And I'm like, that's a terrible title.
Yeah,
That's not the joke.
Right. It makes it sound like God messed up making the stars.
Yeah. Right, rather than the.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get
Also, it's bastardizing Shakespeare himself, which is bad form.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Well, no, yeah.
What do you get?
I get the true believers.
Yeah.
A lot instead of the great believers.
I can see that.
Yeah, and I knew. So this last one, I have some questions for you. It's a long title. I knew that when I chose it, but I got the I have to ask you something, or just any rephrasing of that title.
I have to ask you something.
Right. Yeah. That one was my mom. My mom talking about my book. Right before it came out, I have to ask you something. But yeah, a few questions for you. And I get it. It's fine. But
I like the I in that title a lot.
Right.
Because you could have gone with we. And I like the I in that title a lot.
Yeah.
It's discomforting. It's discomforting. Is that the word?
Discomforting. Yeah. It's also funny because people will find themselves saying that sentence to me in conversation on a fairly regular basis.
Sure.
It actually turns out to be a very common sentence.
Right.
And then will catch themselves and laugh at themselves, and I'm, over it. But yeah.
How important are titles to you? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about them?
I do. And I don't know so for every one of my books, I have either had the title from jump.
Yeah.
Or have been changing it multiple times.
Same.
Up till the last minute, like we're in copy edits and it's got a new name.
Same.
Which ones came right away to you, and which ones?
An Abundance of Catherines I had before I started the book.
That doesn't surprise me.
And it sounds like a title.
Yeah.
And Turtles All the Way Down I had from when I started the book, and Anthropocene I had. But Fault in Our Stars, I kept changing until Amazon needed to put up a title.
Yeah.
And and that day I remember my editor saying, "Today's the day, buddy. We're gonna have a title for this book at 5:00, and you tell me what it is." And I was genuinely on the fence, and it was finally Sarah who was like, "I think The Fault in Our Stars is better than the other ones." If that's what
do you remember any of the other ones?
Yeah, I wanted to call it the sequel, with the idea being that it was a sequel to a non-existent novel, both a sequel to the book that Hazel loved and a sequel to the book that Augustus loved. That's not a very good title, though. And then I also wanted to call it More Light Than Heat, which is a different Shakespeare quote, and there was like a big thing about heat and light in the
Yeah.
book at the time that I ended up cutting out at the last second, but because it wasn't the title, so it
Right. Yeah.
didn't have the same
I
impact.
know what you mean.
What
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah, I've done the same thing too with like changing the book to match the title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some questions for you. Was for a very long time it was 95, meaning the year,
Yeah,
which only makes sense if you know what the book is about already.
right.
And if you just see it and it's just some number, it means absolutely nothing, which is not helpful.
Yeah,
So
but I kind of like those titles
I do
sometimes.
too. Yeah.
I think you found the right title for the book.
I'm happy with where it ended up. I had this idea though that if I called it 95, it would be funny because it would freak out everyone I went to high school with because they would think I was writing about them.
Did you graduate in 1990?
I did.
So did I.
Okay. And yeah.
I'm scared, actually, just knowing that we graduated the same year, that would make me think that you were writing about me on some level.
Right, exactly. I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing is, ultimately, everyone I went to high school with, if they were going to hear about it anyway, heard about it anyway, and thought what they were going to think, and probably realized I was not writing about them. I was writing about you instead. And so we're fine. But
I can tell you from experience that when you do write about your friends from the class of 1995, they don't love it.
I wouldn't imagine.
They don't
Where
love
have
it.
you done that? Can you say, or is it too?
In when I was writing my first novel, I had a conversation with my friend Daniel Alarcon, who's a novelist, but also went to high school with me, and we graduated the same year. And he won all the creative writing prizes at our school, and I came in second at all of them. And correctly so, he's a brilliant writer. And I had a conversation with him, and he said, you're not writing this for the 52 people we went to high school with.
Oh, okay.
And in the end, that was the decision that I made. Looking back, I would have been a little more careful in looking for Alaska, but I never imagined the book would be in print for this long.
Yeah.
I worked at Booklist at the time, and so every 2 weeks at Booklist reviews about 400 books every 2 weeks, and I reviewed hundreds of books while I worked there. And as I'm sure is the case for you, I saw so many brilliant books come and go.
Right. Yeah.
It's so rare that a book hangs around, and I think so many worthy books don't hang around, so it just never crossed my mind that it would be one of the ones that hangs around.
Yeah. I think your first book for everyone, it's this pipe dream that you don't quite want to believe in that it'll even ever appear. And then even then, you have such a, kind of a limited idea of what this might mean. And often, realistically,
Yeah.
it is like I have a book out and now I need to move on and that's over, and people can maybe find it used online at some point. But
Yeah, that's what I figured would happen.
Yeah, yeah.
But that book took, because it felt like such a little book to me. I mean, even not to be immodest or not to be overly modest or anything, but it just felt like a small book, like a book of the moment, not a, what I think somebody said of Gatsby when it came out, that it was a book for the season only.
Yes,
Not for all seasons.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
has proved a little wrong.
Yeah. But he never knew it. He died thinking that was,
He never
died,
knew
it was
it.
out of print, yeah.
He
It's
never
so
knew.
sad. Yeah. Well, part of the reason a book like that sticks around, and I think the reason my first 3 books are still in print, is like later successes, right?
Yeah, for
that
sure.
just people keep rediscovering. I don't think anyone would be running out to buy my first book if that had been the only book I published.
Right.
I can't imagine people still finding it.
Yeah, and we are both extraordinarily lucky in that we've had the opportunities to build a career and
Yeah.
to take chances and do different kinds of things as we've grown and changed
Yeah.
as writers, and that's something that involves a ton of good fortune.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of weave in some of the audience questions because someone asked us something related to that, which was both of you have had extremely popular books published. Are you ever worried about readers or the public pigeonholing you with those works? I think we're both people who write very different things with every book. And
Yeah.
it's you lately, especially.
Yeah, I was worried about being pigeonholed, so I was like, I'm going to write a history of tuberculosis.
What if you get pigeonholed as that? What if that's your most successful book by like 10 times? And
That would
everyone
be- I
forever
mean,
is like, it's the tuberculosis
That would
guy.
be amazing news for anti-tuberculosis advocacy. Like, if it sells 10 times better than The Fault in Our Stars, that would be really good
It
for
could
TV.
happen.
That is, I'm going to start rooting for that, Rebecca. I do worry about it a little bit. I mean, I felt it especially after I wrote The Fault in Our Stars, because then, you know, there was like a 5-year period where people had an expectation that I was going to deliver another book like that.
Yeah.
And that was stressful for me, so much so that I really struggled to write and struggled to like find my way back into a story. And then after I published the book that came after that, Turtles All the Way Down, I just felt like I didn't know, and this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you, like I didn't know what fiction was for. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And I'd always felt very confident and comfortable knowing that fiction matters and fiction is important, and like storytelling is at the core of who we are and what we do. And then suddenly that kind of got pulled out from under me for whatever reason, and I was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be writing.
Yeah.
And that's why I turned to nonfiction.
That's really interesting. I mean, I love nonfiction, and at some point in my life, I will write a nonfiction book that like is, you know, kind of waiting for me to write it. But I don't know. It's interesting because I would feel like with you, you know, coming off The Fault in Our Stars, it should, you know, would have been the fulfillment of this idea of what fiction can do, right? Like the idea of fiction reaching people, changing people's lives.
Yeah.
But maybe something about that shook you in some way.
Maybe, and certainly felt like pressure and, yeah, and also I think it has taken me a long time to believe people when they say that their lives have been positively impacted by my work.
Yeah.
It's so easy to hear that and not really listen to it. And that's not just true for writers, right? That's also true for anybody who does anything and hears that their work has positively impacted someone. It's easy to be like, no, you did that work. Like, I have one of my closest friends is a high school teacher, and whenever anyone says, oh, Mr. Lee, you changed my life, he always says, no, you changed your life, which is lovely, but also it's a way of deflecting the praise and not taking it in.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, because I can look back on books that have changed my life, for sure.
Me too.
And the ones, and all the books that I don't know how they changed my life, but they did. So yeah, I don't know, it's harder to understand that as the author of the thing.
Is it hard for you?
You know, I think it certainly was up to a point. With The Great Believers, and those of you who don't know, it's about the AIDS epidemic in Chicago in the 80s. And I think it's hard when it's a vague general thing, right? Someone's like, that book changed my life. It's very different when someone has a specific story. Like, my uncle died of AIDS when I was a kid. My parents refused to talk about it. I sat them down. I made them read this book. We had it out. Anyway, I tracked down his partner, and we're having coffee next week. Like, that changed oh my
their
God,
life.
yeah.
Right.
And like, that's impossible for me to be like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, that's, you know, that's huge.
Yeah, and I think maybe my version of that is kids who live with serious illness or live with cancer, reaching out and responding generously to that book or making me part of their Make-A-Wish or whatever. That is really wonderful and really lovely, and something that I like a privilege that I take quite seriously, or try to. Yeah.
So that, I mean, why, like, yes, I think you're not turning away from fiction forever, are you?
No. I'm trying to write a novel now, actually. That's for adults, but I'm still struggling with this question of what the hell do I do about myself? So the main character is a novelist.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't seem to be as bothered about this problem. Just like, you're just there inside the damn book, no matter what you do.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the book, right? And I think for me, like I can look at certain books and say I was more in this one, or there's more of me in this character, or there's more of my biography in this book.
Yeah.
And then other ones where I know what drew me to it personally, but it's got nothing to do with me.
Right.
Right? Like the book that I'm writing right now, it's set in 1938. No one can look at that and be like, oh, this is because this also happened to Rebecca. There's nothing like that, right? So it's a nice break for coming on the heels of a book that was like very much, you know,
about a milieu that you
right,
knew
and
really
the year
well.
that I graduated high school, and exactly, but
it was so evocative of that time.
I'm so glad.
It's so good, man. I love
so
that
glad.
book so much.
I'm so glad.
But yeah, it really it reminded me more of 1995 than my own memories do, if that makes sense. 'Cause my own memories are so filtered through the present that you can't actually get to the thing itself.
Well, sometimes someone says something to you that you'd forgotten, right? And you
Right.
think, or you hear a song. I had a lot of fun just making Spotify playlists of the music of 1995, and some of it you still hear, but some things I had not heard since like 1996. And you hear that song, and you're like, whoa, I'm remembering all this stuff now. But so
Yeah,
it's
I
kinda
listened to a
fun.
lot of bad country music.
Oh, wow.
I was in Alabama.
Well, you were in Alabama,
so
yeah,
it makes
that'll
sense,
do it.
but yeah,
Yeah, I was here. I was, North Shore, less country music.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask more questions that are on this list because these are good questions. For both of us, how do we go about researching? So talking about like writing someone who's different from us, researching new topics, characters, hobbies, jobs, tendencies, etc. when writing something new.
For me, it has to begin with it begins with an individual character, just one, and wanting to know them and wanting to understand them and wanting to understand where they are. And the research emerges from that rather than like I'm falling down a research rabbit hole about contamination OCD and then I write about a character who has contamination OCD.
Yeah.
It's more like I'm fascinated by this, the way that this thing would impinge upon this person's life and what that would mean for her, which is very different from what it might mean for me because she's a very different kind of person. And that is, it's almost like childhood imagination, like the child's game of playing make-believe.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I want it to be more textural. I want it to have a certain grit to it so that it feels quite real. Mm-hmm. And that is where research comes in for me.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I think that I've seen so many students kind of shoot themselves in the foot by feeling like they have to do all the research first.
Right.
And it's like you don't even know what you need, right? Versus kind of, jump in, start writing the thing, leave a blank where you need to do research, or stop and do the research when you have to, but trying to learn everything there is to know about dentistry or something, right, before you can write this dentist character. Well, it's going to take you like 5 years. It's going to be impossible, and you're never going to know where to stop because you don't know what's enough.
Yeah, I think you don't know what you need until you're writing the story a lot of times.
Yeah.
But then also, sometimes I find pleasure in it in and of itself. I mean, that's certainly the case now for writing about tuberculosis. It's been fascinating to learn about tuberculosis for the last 4 years. But even when I'm writing novels, like I remember there was this whole subplot of Paper Towns that I cut that was about the United States Postal Service and the history of the Postal Service.
Whoa.
And my editor read it and she was like, it seems like you got really interested in this. And but like, I don't think 16-year-olds really give a shit about the history of the United States Postal Service, which is fair enough.
Well, okay, this is one thing that I love about your books, though, is that suddenly you'll give us the history of Indianapolis or something, And it's one thing that was so great about Anthropocene was it was like just an entire book of that stuff. Yeah. Here's everything I know about this. Here's everything, But I love that. I guess, if you go on for too long about a thing that maybe.
But it's joyful for me to reflect the joy of learning something,
Totally.
and the joy of especially making connections.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was writing about the history of Piggly Wiggly, for instance, this grocery store chain in the South. My wife was like, "Oh, Piggly Wiggly was actually very important to the history of American commerce," and I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, it was really." She was like, "They invented the grocery store as we know it today, where instead of you going to a grocer with a list and then the grocer going and getting everything, you get everything." And I was like, "No way. Piggly Wiggly?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Also, the guy who invented Piggly Wiggly was this insane monster of Memphis." And I was like, "No way." And it was all true. And but then making connections between this weird individual and the history of American football, or making connections between, the ways that we wander aisles in grocery stores and the way that we sort of like wander aisles in our lives now as consumers, and the way that's changing as we don't wander the aisles anymore. Now it mostly happens digitally. Like all that stuff is exciting.
Yeah. So this is why I love your work, partly, part of the reason. It's also, I think I'm curious for you, like, I have pretty intense ADHD, which is in many ways hell, and in many ways is a gift creatively, one of which being you see connections between all these things, and you want to see connections between all the things. Every one thing reminds you of 35 other things. And you could lose yourself all day in the research rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And I wonder, with OCD too, I think there's a similar, like, let me learn literally everything kind of
Yeah, there's an
mentality, right?
obsessiveness to the way that I approach learning now that works for me.
Yeah, yeah.
That I've learned to use for me. Like, I don't think there's a ton of silver linings to having OCD, and obviously it's better to treat it than not to treat it on a lot of levels, and I can't work if I'm sick. I can't get anything done. But having a somewhat obsessive brain is probably helpful in creative work. And also, like, I don't mind repetitive tasks, like signing my name over and over again, or like things like that.
Yeah, same with the ADHD, actually, because there's something about just, like, I can get in a zone, I can listen to a podcast, I can, like,
It's a great job.
Yeah.
I don't understand why more authors don't do it.
I could do it all day. Oh my God.
I do it all day.
Yeah, yeah.
I did it all day right before I came here,
Yeah.
and it was a great day.
Yeah, yeah.
I listened to an entire audiobook, and I signed my name for 8 hours, and at the end of it, I was like, this was a great day.
Yeah, yeah. I was just writing a lot of political postcards, and my problem was I took too much thought.
Oh,
I couldn't just zone out.
That's too hard.
Yeah.
No, just the signature.
Yeah,
Vote. Signature.
That might work for you. Like, just like, I'm John Green, please vote, might work. I don't know, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was going to, so research before we go to more questions. I have a lot of fun, because they actually said, like, how do you research, which I want to make sure I answer. I do a lot of, if it's historical, I do a lot of buying old stuff online.
Me too.
Yeah, like Sears catalog. Do you ever do that, like, from that year?
Yeah.
Magazines. And if it's not historical, I do a lot of interviewing people. Like, sit down and talk to me. It's especially important with something like AIDS.
Sure.
And, like, important for many different reasons. But that's a fun one too. Just like, I'm going to take you out for a drink. Tell me everything.
Yeah, one of the joys of writing about tuberculosis is that TB researchers, if you call them at like 9:35 p.m. on a Wednesday, and you're like, hey, do you have any time in the next week? They're like, why don't we just talk now?
Yeah.
They're so anxious to get the word out there.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing.
That they're extremely cooperative subjects for interviews, which has been nice.
Yeah, I think most people are, weirdly. Like, people like to talk about their lives,
Yeah, and if you can create a safe space for them,
Yes.
which can be hard, but if you can, I think people generally want to share their experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so someone's asking, how do either of you combat creative block? What do you do to try and move out of that funk? That is a hard question, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, poorly. I confront it poorly.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think there are two different things. One is I'll have periods where I'm like, kind of can't write, like can't make myself write. But it's not that I'm stuck creatively, right? Like, I know what I want to write, and I might not write for like 3 months, but I'm thinking about the book the whole time.
Yeah.
I know if I could make myself sit down, I know exactly what I'd write. So it's not that I'm blocked, it's that I just like, it's a, neurodivergent thing. I just can't make myself sit down and work. But I've learned my rhythms enough to trust that I can't work now, but then eventually I'm going to sit down and work for 2 weeks straight, and I'm going to write like 40,000 words, because that's how I
You
do things.
You didn't really write 40,000 words in 2 weeks ever, did you?
3 weeks, I did, yeah.
Oh my
So I just did, you know what it is?
Of what?
Of the book I'm working on now.
Oh, wow.
So for all you know, it's horrible and unpublishable. No, because I
can't wait. I mean, I'm going to judge it so differently now.
I might look
It's
back
going to be like
and
this,
it's
like
just
on the road.
gibberish.
Like Rebecca wrote this.
No, I had a residency.
Oh,
So I
okay.
had, so it was like nothing to do all day for 18 days.
What a
except
blessing.
Write. Yeah, it was incredible. And you get into this rhythm of just like, well, there's nothing else to do. It would be a waste to do something else. I'm here, I'm in this beautiful place. And you just go. And then you look back at the end and go, oh my God, I wrote 40,000 words. And I'm pretty sure that that I'm going to look back and it's going to be all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You know, like it's going to be. But well, I do know that I'm going to look back and go like, why did that? You know, I haven't reread anything. It was just go, go, go. But I have learned that I can do that, and you know. So people ask me, and I like this question because the question I usually get is, "What's your writing routine? What's your daily ritual?" Like, I don't have one. Oh my God, that I'm just not that kind of person. And
Right.
you don't have to be that kind of person. And I stopped a long time ago. I stopped putting pressure on myself to be that kind of writer.
Yeah, you hear over and over again, oh, you have to write every day, you have to write every
I hate
day.
that.
I've never written every day. I've always had a day job. I've always had other things that I do for work, and I like having a job. I would feel weird if writing was my only job. It would make me feel like we would put too much pressure on writing, I think. And I don't do it every day because I have other stuff going on, and the kids need to be picked up from school, or like somebody's sick at home, or like I want to sign my name over and over again, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But like you, what I do need to be in order to get out of those creative funks, I need to be thinking about the story.
Yes.
When I go to bed at night, I need to think about the story. And when I have quiet moments, I need to be thinking about the story. And that is working.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to get confused about that because it doesn't feel like working because we have this like capitalist system where if you aren't like clocked in, you're not working.
Yeah.
But like if you're doing creative work, like that's part of creative work is just like sitting around watching a basketball game and thinking about like what the character would be experiencing watching this basketball game.
Yes. I do I'll like go for a walk kind of as a character.
Yeah.
Which
is so fun. Like it is like a child's game.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculously fun. Now I'm remembering why I like to write fiction. It's because it's fun.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a blast.
I mean, it's not always fun.
No, and it also sucks, but it's you're playing, you know.
Yeah, it's playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm constantly on top of my students about, you know, typing does not equal writing. And because they'll come in, you know, like for a long time I was teaching sort of a year-long novel class, and we'd meet only every month. And at the beginning of every class, like, you know, okay, so how's the writing been in the past month? And you get someone going like, oh my God, it didn't work at all. I was like obsessing about the book, and I like redid my outline, and then I did all this research. And then I traveled to the place where the book is set, and then I redid my outline again. And then I like edited my first 50 pages. Anyway, I did no work. Like, listen to yourself. That's writing. That is work. And if you don't because the flip side of that is people who don't let themselves stop and do that stuff.
Right.
And they think they have to write 1,000 words every day, no matter what, and they never let themselves research or outline or stew in it.
Yeah.
And then it's a problem later.
Yeah, you have to let yourself, especially stick with I'm such a poor plotter that like I have to let myself stick with the problems of plot for a long time and like stick with this actual story problems for a long time. And then often the solutions are like ridiculously simple. Like I remember the first draft of The Fault in Our Stars. It ended with the main character and her favorite novelist like driving with the intention of like killing terrorists. And because they were going to be these like great martyrs who were going to sacrifice themselves in the name of a greater good and everything.
Okay.
And I like sat on that plot problem for probably 6 months. Like, what could it be instead of that?
Oh my God.
And finally, it's just like a letter from her boyfriend. Like that's the ending I eventually came up with. You know, like.
Right.
Like, why didn't I get there earlier? You know, why did I have to go through all that weird rigmarole? But you do.
But you do, that's it. And it's not wasted time.
It's not wasted time. This is so important. Like, I have books that I have to abandon, and it's heartbreaking, and I feel terrible, and my stomach hurts, and I realize, like, I wrote this whole desert island novel that I was really proud of, and then I read it, and I was like, holy shit, like, this isn't just bad, there's also no, like, guts in it, so it's sort of doubly bad, and there was only one sentence that I could save from the whole thing, which is in The Fault in Our Stars. The sentence was, it was kind of a beautiful day. It's not even that good of a sentence.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But I had to write that.
Yeah.
I believe that I had to do that in order to write the book that I eventually wrote.
Well, and you think about as like any other art form, the amount of work someone does that the audience doesn't see. Like an actor, you spend months in rehearsal, and then the audience sees this little bit of it. Or a painter, you see, you don't see any of the studies, the sketches, the preliminary stuff. And then as writers, we can kind of feel like, it would be such a waste to throw away these words that I wrote. Like forgetting that maybe the audience should only see like 5% of what you do.
Yeah. I love deleting 90% of a first draft.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
really enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's like the funnest. I'm sticking with it. That's the funnest part of
funnest.
writing for me.
Yeah.
Is when you just get to strip away and you're like, oh, well, I built a skeleton here.
Yeah.
And I put some weird meat on those bones, and I'm
Yeah.
going to have to just stick with the skeleton.
Yeah, I love cutting. I love going in and going, I'm gonna, like, in revision, like, I'm gonna try to cut 2,000 words today.
Yeah.
And it could be a paragraph, but it could also be like, why did I say yellow colored when I could just say yellow? And just, there's one word right there.
Yeah.
He paced around. He could just pace. And it's so much fun, and you can kind of laugh at yourself, too.
Yeah.
Like, why did I think I needed this?
Right. And then stripping it down to does other things.
Oh,
it
yeah.
makes it voicier. It makes it sound the way you actually want it to sound.
Yeah, totally. With the question, okay, I should make sure I actually answer the question. You want to, which was how do you get past the block? I mean, I think like thinking about the story, right? Like instead of sitting down and going, here's my computer, here's the place I got stuck, I need to write the next sentence now. Like walking around in it, right? Thinking about it, outlining, researching. Those things are really useful.
Yeah, and I try to give myself permission to move around in the story too.
Oh yeah, write a different
So
part.
to just say like, I don't know how to solve this problem, but I'm interested in these people, and so I'm going to have them. Like I remember when I was writing Looking for Alaska, I was like, I would like these kids to play Mario Kart now. And that's not in the book or anything. It's just something that I did in high school that I was like, I think if these kids play Mario Kart, I'll get some answers. And I did. I got some answers.
That's amazing.
None of that ended up in the book, but I was like, all right,
Yeah.
I needed to know that stuff. Like, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. The one other thing I'll say is sometimes I realize I need to go back and see what seeds I planted already early in the book that I have not harvested yet. Just some throwaway comment or some character. Like, what is in here that I could bring back?
Yeah,
That can be really fun.
that is fun.
Yeah, yeah.
It's even the funnest.
They can't both be the funnest. What was the other funnest thing? They can be tied for funnest.
I think my daughter says funnest, and I can't believe
Yeah.
that I've taken to it.
I love it. Okay. This is a really, I think, important one. So we can make this our last audience question. Given the increasing instances of book banning, how do you think this trend impacts the themes and messages you aim to convey in your writing, particularly those that address complex and often controversial topics?
I try not to let it affect me at all.
Yeah, me too.
Because I don't want those people. I think part of the strategy is to have a chilling effect on intellectual discourse in the United States, and so I don't want that strategy to work. I want to be clear that I don't think authors are like the heroes of the intellectual freedom battle as much as I wish that we were. I think it's teachers and librarians who are making doing the daily work and who are trained professionals having their
And who are often risking their jobs where we are not.
who are risking their jobs in the name of intellectual freedom and who already have jobs that don't involve endlessly going through book challenges and going to an endless number of school board meetings and the like to try to be able to teach what you know how to teach and what you're good at teaching and what you should be teaching. So we are a small character in that, but I do feel an obligation to try to write in a way that is appropriate for the audience. I've always felt that, and when I'm writing for teenagers, I want to write in a way that's appropriate for teenagers, but that doesn't mean not writing about sex, or it doesn't mean not writing about drugs. It means writing in a way that can be accessible to them, using figurative language and metaphor and other figurative strategies in ways that will resonate with them. It does not mean like pretending that sex doesn't exist, which is ludicrous, and also like I don't know if these people have been on the internet, but it's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
The fight has been lost.
Yeah. Well, it's at the same time, it's like, that battle has been lost, but one of the biggest problems with book bans is that they work.
They do.
And, right, you might have a kid who's only going to read 30 books in their life, and you've just taken
one away.
Yeah, or taken many off the table.
Yeah.
And those are books that could have changed this kid's life or made them feel seen. And, but I'm with you. Like, I think there are going to be people who, in various ways, people on school boards, people, running book festivals, whatever it is, who buckle because out of fear, just because they feel this coming for them, they can't risk their job, whatever it is. And I think as someone who is not at risk of losing a job, at this point, I'm never interested in buckling in that way. And if I need to if I need to become an expat because something, I'm not even going to go there, but I will.
Yeah,
you know?
and you can,
Yeah,
which is a level
exactly.
of
It's privilege,
It's
and
a level of
so
privilege.
you use your privilege. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I think Looking for Alaska is going to be, I think a study is going to come out that it was the second most banned book in the US this year, which is really
Wild.
just weird for me because I thought it was a Christian novel. I was like, a young Christian kid writing this book about radical hope and the universality of forgiveness and everything. And it's very baffling to me that so many people who share my faith tradition are so mad at me.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to take personally, but of course it isn't about me. And I think it's really important to underscore, because we used to hear, oh, well, book banning is great for book sales. And maybe that was the case like 30 or 40 years ago. It's really not the case now. So like Looking for Alaska is both like one of the most banned books in the US, and sales of it are going down. And so I think that it works.
Yeah.
Like it works as a strategy for saying this kind of book isn't appropriate for schools. It's not being. It works as a strategy for saying it shouldn't be taught in American high schools. It works as a strategy for saying it shouldn't be in libraries.
Yeah.
And that, as you say, takes a book out of a kid's hand that might be a book that could be really helpful for them.
Yeah, and it works preemptively where I've had The Great Believers is taught in some high schools. I have also had, more than I've heard of it being taught in high schools, I have had people come up to me and say, I wish I could teach this. Yeah, but I know I couldn't get away with it. Where they're not even going there because they know what would happen, and that's a different kind of banning.
And when I was in high school, we read Tony Kushner's Angels in America, and I remember that book had the kind of impact on me that I know that The Great Believers has on a lot of young people now. And it's not just that it's a book that can transform the lives of young people, although I think that it is. It's one of my favorite books. I think it's like a major American novel.
Yeah.
But also, it's not just that. It's also that we have made a decision to hire experts to do this called teachers.
Yeah.
And it is weird to me that we are undermining their expertise at every turn and making it a battle.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I got to read Toni Morrison in high school, that I got to read Tony Kushner in high school, that I got to read Kurt Vonnegut and Zora Neale Hurston and all of these authors who now it is really hard to teach them in high schools.
Yeah, and I really appreciate sometimes being shocked by what I read. You're a teenager and you're like, whoa. And
I didn't know books could do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is thrilling.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, that's how we should feel when we read. We should feel that like thrill that we felt the first time we read something that we really loved. And I think that giving kids that opportunity or denying kids that opportunity is a huge loss, like for the social order.
Yeah. Okay, the way I'm going to end this, I said this backstage, because those of you who've read the Anthropocene Reviewed know that John rates things 1 through 5 stars.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lightning round. You don't have to explain your answer.
Great.
I'm just going to give you a few things to rate really quickly.
Let's do it.
Okay. Book bans.
1 star.
Exactly. Okay.
That's the lowest rating.
That is, there's no 0
There's
stars.
no 0 stars.
It's like
I
Goodreads.
think people who do 0 stars are full of it.
Chicago.
Oh, 5-star city.
5-star city? All right. Good answer. Evanston.
4.5 stars. I'm good friends with
The mayor is in the audience, come on.
The mayor of Evanston, Daniel Biss, who's here today. But 5 stars. 5-star city. I love Evanston.
Okay, your new tuberculosis book in comparison to all of your other books.
Oh God, I have no idea.
How you feel about it personally.
Well, I like it, but of course I'm going to like it,
Yeah.
Rebecca. The question
Yeah.
is, are the people going to
We
like
don't know.
it? I'm going to say
That's-
3.5 stars.
3.5 stars. Okay. 3.5 stars. All right, that's solid. That's solid.
Yeah.
Okay, ramen.
Ooh, 3 stars for me.
3 stars.
Yeah.
Only 3.
Sorry.
Good ramen? Even good ramen?
Even good ramen.
Man, okay.
I had good ramen the other day, and I was like, it's not my favorite.
Oh,
I
man.
like it.
Okay. Since we were talking about it earlier, the bean.
Oh, it's a 4.5-star sculpture. It's really good.
It's cool.
It's almost like we forget that it's good because so many people are looking at themselves in it, and that's kind of annoying.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's almost like we forget that it's good because the people who say that it's good, like, might annoy us or whatever,
Yeah.
but, like, actually it is very good, I
Yeah.
think.
If you could be alone with the bean.
If you could be alone with the bean.
That
it
would be 5 stars,
That
right?
would be a 5-star experience,
Okay,
but that's
yes.
gonna be tough.
Okay, we'll end on that. 5-star experience.
All right.
Amazing.
Thank y'all so much.